How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt, and Mihir Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast, and this is Game Time. The Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan earlier this month has sparked widespread fear in the country, and among the many uncertainties now is the giant question mark on sport in Afghanistan. During the group's first stint in power, most forms of entertainment sports were banned, and we will get into the various sports and how the Afghan athletes were making their mark, putting the country on the global sporting map. But firstly, Mihir, we often talk about the power of sport to transform and uplift lives, give people a purpose. But wasn't it especially true in the case of Afghanistan? And if you could perhaps run down the sort of presence that Afghanistan has had in the sporting world over the years.
We don't need to look far beyond two very popular sports, Gaurav, cricket and football. In cricket, Afghanistan, we all know the kind of heroics they have. They have the heroics and the fairy tales that they've scripted in the last few years. I find that very strange that how Taliban supported cricket and all those things, like as if Afghanistan cricket needed Taliban's seal of approval. But at least the sport didn't suffer that much while their rule was there the last time around. But the sport really flourished after Taliban were removed from power, and we've seen how they've challenged some of the top cricketing nations over the years. And it's the same in football. Of course, we'll be going into details as we carry on with our episode today, but football, the team which wasn't really active in international stage for close to 20 years, they came as far as beating India, who have been around forever, not doing that much, but still it was a great leap for them. They stood toe-to-toe against some of the top countries in Asia, didn't really go down without a fight. And you wrote a story about extreme sports and adventurous sports like parkour as well, Gaurav, how they have flourished in the last few years.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, like you said, we'll get into all those sports. But let's start with just like you did with two names of the sports. I'll just give you two names from cricket, Rashid Khan and Mohammad Nabi. These two Afghan cricketers, they became household names in not just India. Of course, there were the IPL exploits, but name a cricket league, name a T20 league, and these two mainstays were there. Throw in Mujibur Rahman as well. CPL ho jaye, chahe Caribbean mein, chahe Big Bash ho jaye. Currently the 100 in England. These two have been the flag bearers of Afghan cricket, and bigger picture dekhe to Afghan sport as well. Like Mihir mentioned, the Taliban's rule between 96 and 2001, sub entertainment banned tha aapka music, movies, even chess. Cricket too was initially banned because they believed that the sport kept men away from prayers, but later they not just became more tolerant of cricket, but in 2000 decided to promote the sport. And now, like Mihir said, from a fledgling sport, it has become an established sport. Afghanistan has close to 1.2 million playing the sport, of whom 300 are fully fledged professionals. World Cup yaad kar sakte hain. They ran India close. It took Mohammad Shami of India to take a hat-trick in the over to see off Afghanistan. Afghanistan played their first test against India. Kafi one-sided, but there again Rashid Khan shined. Then they defeated Ireland in their test match, which was a huge deal. And we need to remember the stories that these are cricketers who learned the trade, who improved their skills in the refugee camps in Pakistan. And from there to go on to compete at the World Cup, to become a test nation, speaks volumes. अभी currently भी यार, amidst all this turmoil, कुछ ही किलोमीटर दूर, people are scampering, they are surrounding the tarmac at the Kabul International Airport, और अफगानिस्तान की टीम प्रैक्टिस कर रही है इन हालातों के बीच में भी for their tour to Pakistan. And Afghanistan Cricket Board CEO Hamid Shinwari has been saying that the Taliban will be supportive of cricket development in the country, and the star players will not have any trouble representing the senior national team. इसमें एक interesting बात यह है कि there's a Afghanistan international batsman called Karim Sadiq, who in 2019 actually visited some of these Taliban controlled areas, and the fighters there, Kalashnikov rifle सबने उठा रखी है, and they surrounded the guy and they kept asking him about यार टीम कैसा कर रही है, how is Rashid Khan looking, is he in good form and all, and they started discussing all their favorite players and how they support Afghanistan team. Radio बिल्कुल बगल में रहता है whenever Afghanistan cricket team is playing. So cricket in that sense is still, again, nobody is saying कि a perfect situation है, it's far from perfect, but at least they say that they'll allow the Afghanistan men's cricket team to go on and compete and to continue the good work that they're doing. But Mihir, काफी contrast, I guess, football रहेगा because the stint that I mentioned, the brutal first stint, जिसमें cricket चलो अलाउ हो गया कि यार फुल स्लीव है, पूरा आपने पजामे पहने हैं तो you're not showing legs. But football was worse off because players, of course, play in shorts, and that was against Taliban rules. And now, as it stands, firstly, what was the trajectory of Afghanistan football, or अब क्या situation होगी यार? How worse off are they?
So yeah, Gaurav, for football, of course, the troubles were there even before the Taliban rule. And in the years of violence and war, the football team suffered a lot. So from 1984 to 2002, they didn't play a single international game. And during Taliban rule, of course, there was absolutely no chance for them to do anything. After Taliban was ousted, in 2003, they played their first international tournament. That was the South Asian Football Federation's Gold Cup. And at that point, Afghanistan was ranked 200 in the world. And if I remember correctly, around that time in 2003-4, FIFA had 203 or 5 or something like that registered members. So they were literally at the bottom of world football. But it has always been a very popular sport in the region. And they caught on, matlab, in the years that followed, late 2000s and through the last decade, like their journey has been remarkable. So much so that one of their most famous players, Zohaib Islam Amiri, he now plays in India, and he was one of the first Afghan players to come and actually play professional football in India. Now, this is a very lovely story. He is the son of ethnic Hazara shopkeeper. He started playing football with hand stitched rolled up fabric ball, fabric से जो हम लोग hand stitch करते हैं उस तरह का ball था. He witnessed killings at the main football stadium in Kabul as a child. Of course, his family had to go through a lot of hardships, but he survived all that. He often described it as a nightmare that he lived through. And when he joined Mumbai FC 10 years ago, in 2011, when he joined Mumbai FC, तब से he has become one of the most popular players, not just in India, but also in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the fans voted him as the player of the year in 2013. He became the face of Afghan football, so to say, went on to captain their national team, and he played for, I think, 5 or 6 Indian clubs: Mumbai FC, Dempo, Chennai City, Gokulam Kerala, all big clubs. And right now he is with Real Kashmir. And his rise as a footballer also coincided with Afghanistan's rise as a footballing nation. So they started winning odd match here and there. From there they built on, they started challenging the bigger nations in the neighborhood. And their highest point came when they defeated India to win the South Asian Football Championship. From there, to improve further, they joined the Central Asian region, where they could play with better teams, stronger physically, and teams that are closer to their country, closer to their region. So it provided them with bigger, better exposure. And they climbed as far as 122nd in FIFA rankings. I think that's what their ranking is right now. So for the men's team, it was a whirlwind this last 20 years. And for the women's, well, they didn't exist before 2007. The women's national team for Afghanistan was formed in 2007. They played their first ever game in 2010. And it's been a mixed bag since then. So they're, I think, right now ranked 152nd in the world. And that's a big drop from their best, which was 106. And I mean, we've read stories about their football captain right now extremely worried about the state, not just of the sport, that becomes secondary, but the lives of their players, her teammates. She is out of Afghanistan, but a lot of her teammates are in the country trying to find their way out. And I think that's the case for everyone in Afghanistan. Sports persons are no different.
Absolutely, Aaron. You touched upon a very pertinent point, that is of women's sports. जब हम cricket की बात कर रहे हैं and how they were allowed and the sport was promoted, we need to emphasize that it was only the men's cricket that was allowed and promoted, and women's cricketers of Afghanistan, they also were stirred into action, seeing the male counterparts, and they were charting their own path, their own trajectory. But abhi, again, everything is uncertain. And more or less हमें तो खैर पता ही है कि the women's sports will not be allowed. And Mihir, उसका implication we have seen at the ongoing Paralympics as well, right?
Yes, Gaurav, and this would have been a landmark moment for the Paralympics, especially in Afghanistan, where Zakia Khudadadi, she was set to become the first woman from Afghanistan to compete at the Paralympics, but she couldn't make it to Tokyo because the commercial flights from Kabul were halted following Taliban's takeover of the capital and the country and the chaos that followed. So it became impossible for her to leave Tokyo. And you've seen statement by Afghanistan Paralympic Committee's chief, Aryan Sadiki, a statement that was given to Reuters where they confirmed that the player could not leave Kabul in time. And what was supposed to be a landmark moment for world sport and Afghanistan sport became a rather unfortunate incident. And still, during the opening ceremony of the Paralympics on Tuesday, you saw a volunteer come out with Afghanistan's flag. It was a touching moment, but it also kind of served as a reminder of what perhaps the next few years could be like. The backstory for Afghanistan at the Olympics isn't that great. They won 2 bronze medals in their history, but after Taliban took control the first time in the late 90s, their Olympic committee was suspended and the team was barred from competing in the Sydney Olympics because of the atrocities against women. And it was only after Taliban were defeated the first time around that they were allowed to compete at the Olympics again. So who knows what's in store in the years that will follow now.
That entire thing, yeah, women's sport का and this Paralympian and खाली हम अगर बात करें कि just to teach women a sport or to train them physically or to even as a form of self-defense, वो भी कितना ज़्यादा खतरनाक है under the Taliban rule. I got in touch with the two 20-somethings who are essentially the founding fathers of parkour in Afghanistan, Jamil Shirzad and Qudrat Frotan. Now, parkour or free running for our listeners is a sort of martial art, extreme sport, a fitness craze rolled into one. It has its roots in the military training in pre-World War I France, or generally point A to point B you have to reach doing a number of flips and leaps and kitna creatively you can do it in kitna time. And listeners, if you've seen the Casino Royale movie, the entire opening sequences, it features a great parkour practitioner. Video games like Assassin's Creed, parkour is a very famous phenomenon recent years. In Afghanistan, it was becoming an expression of freedom, an expression of creativity. Jamil Shirzad founded the Kabul Boys Parkour and Qudrat Frotan, he founded the Afghan Parkour Society. और international federation से काफी support मिल रहा था. These two were recognized for their good work and they would go to all these dilapidated buildings and they would do their parkour stunts and their parkour practice there on the war ruins on eastern boundary of Kabul. उसके अलावा ये लोग बच्चों को train करते थे and there was this growing legion of people who will look at them as sort of modern day Spider-Man of Kabul. They would stop dead in their tracks and pedestrians रुक जाएंगे, motorists रुक जाएंगे, and they would look at these guys that they would leap off barricades and scale buildings and drainage pipes. But अब हुआ ये कि इतना expression of freedom, creativity, and because they were teaching a lot of girls and it was essentially a not-for-profit situation, now their lives are in danger and they are in hiding, both of these guys. I got in touch with them last week and this is what Jamil Shirzad had to say about the current situation.
As a team member, I have started to a campaign through social media and Instagram by the name of Kabul Boys Parkour. I started a campaign to ask for help from international communities to evacuate these members from Afghanistan as soon as possible to the final destination where they could dream, where they could be free to think, where they could be free to express themselves.
Yeah.
And if I leave Afghanistan without them, then I would feel that I'm a loser leader. Yeah. I'm a loser coach. So I'm trying to evacuate all of them because it's not a safe place for none of us here, because those are videos, our activities, our performances for our fights for gender rights, to train girls to be active, to train girls to be self-defensive and performing on streets. And all of these activities, all of them, we thought that Afghanistan is going towards a better future. But all of these came as a nightmare and a bad dream. All of our members are hidden. and we are like stuck in here in Kabul, and we want to find a way out for the safety of our members or family members, which is directly impacted with these activities. And all our dreams have gone. I cannot say because I'm very worried about members.
This is Jamil Shirzad talking about how he hasn't slept in 60 hours and pura din he's trying to stay awake to get that one phone call from his mother and his siblings. उन सबसे ये अलग रह रहे हैं because they don't want to endanger them. Society and the group जो भी इनका था उस सब के सारे members are in hiding. They are constantly changing locations. They talk about the Taliban militants being around all the corners, cars में, rifles के साथ में. And they are knocking on doors trying to find the guys, and that is the situation. Even Kudur Frotan, the guy from Afghan Parkour Society, he was one of the guys on that fateful Tuesday. जो सब thousands of log went to the airport trying to escape from the country. And there was a ruckus and explosion, he says, a stampede that followed, and his friend got 16 stitches on the head, a broken arm, and they rushed back to the dormitory in Kabul. And they are hiding there. तो काफी ज्यादा मुश्किल सिचुएशन है में.
एग्जैक्टली गौरव. एंड हमें मतलब एक्चुअली और कितना ऑन ग्राउंड ऐसे स्टोरीज रहेंगे अबाउट स्पोर्ट्स पर्सन्स एंड स्पोर्ट्स एंड देयर ड्रीम्स गेटिंग completely shattered in a matter of few days. We can't even imagine. But Gaurav, when you spoke to these guys who are involved in parkour, what did it mean to them? What could you sense कि जब ही उन्हें एक जो freedom मिला था ये to do what they did? We take it for granted. ये काफी सारी चीजें जो हम day to day करते हैं. But what sense did you get while you were talking to them कि why did they enjoy doing this so much and how much did it mean to them?
एक तो यार इट इज सच अ क्रेजी कोट अनकोट स्पोर्ट कि यू यूजुअली थिंक व्हाई इज एनीबडी डूइंग इट. कोई भी क्यों बिल्डिंगों में से खिड़कियों में से कूद रहा है एंड यू नो जंपिंग डाउन सो मेनी फ्लोर्स एंड एवरीथिंग. बट I think Kudrab broke it down perfectly when he said कि the youth of Afghanistan who was getting attracted toward a sport like parkour, जिसमें physically you are drained at the end of a session, mentally during a run you are trying to figure out ways how to improve said run, how to get over an obstacle. यार वो physically it translated into that as well. When they are getting over an obstacle, when they are jumping over a barricade or a barrier, it represented them getting over the bitter history. Kudrat said ki, you know, the wars in Afghanistan had left the youth traumatized and everybody was looking for that piece of freedom which they found in parkour, and young people in general were very frustrated. And he says there was no trust among them. Generally, कोई बाहर निकल के अपने ही कोई हम उम्र बंदे के साथ में भी मिलना नहीं चाहता था कि यू नेवर नो कि क्या सिचुएशन एस्केलेट हो जाएगी अगर 3-4 लोग साथ में भागने लग गए. बट everyone was facing those sort of psychological challenges. By doing parkour, they learned how to get over the mental blocks as well as the problem in their lives. Violence is never a solution. Thinking is the solution. But ironically, ho ye gaya ki the one main mantra of parkour, which these two imparted on their students and trainees, was that you can get over any obstacle. You can jump over any obstacle. But suddenly they realized that this is an obstacle which seems insurmountable. ये लोग अभी बहुत ज़्यादा हताश हैं. They're worried about their students, of course, and the students के साथ में contact खो चुका है पूरी तरीके से. And the rest of the members also जो जुड़े थे 3 बंदों से मिलके 60 बंदे बने over a decade. Suddenly 58 of them, they couldn't track them कि वो लोग कहाँ पे हैं, are they in hiding, are they, you know, in good condition or not. And suddenly they say कि this is not just the end of parkour. थोड़ा naively, I know it was a banal question when I posed कि, you know, do you think this is the end of parkour in Afghanistan? And very succinctly they said कि यार end of parkour तो छोड़ो, this is the end of life in Afghanistan. And we feel like losers. I feel like a loser leader कि मुझे अभी अफगानिस्तान छोड़ के भागने का ट्राई करना पड़ेगा. I would have to go to either Pakistan or Iran illegally. And I feel very sad कि this was such a ground for budding talents and everything, but we'd have to leave everything behind and just run. And this running is very different from the running into and running over the obstacles that they used to do. They are running away from all the troubles now.
It's heartbreaking, yeah, because even if, like, we are reading reports of Taliban saying कि नहीं, will not affect anyone's lives and will not do this and that, अगर जो हम naively believe भी कर ले ये सारी चीजें, but we can't imagine the mental toll all this will take for them to continue doing what they do. I mean, cricket, जो हम कह रहे हैं कि a sport that Taliban quote unquote enjoyed and promised कि हम कुछ नहीं करेंगे उन्हें भी. But we saw this report earlier this week कि Afghanistan's 3-match series against Pakistan, which was originally supposed to be played in Sri Lanka but then moved to Pakistan, that got postponed, because of the flight restrictions and travel issues, but also because the mental health of the players. इतना कुछ आपके कंट्री में हो रहा है, इतना uncertainty about your family, yourself. आप इसमें कहाँ पर क्या खेलोगे? I mean, what motivation will you even have to pick up a bat and play or jump off buildings for fun or kick a ball? So it's such a tragic scenario because I was turning into this big fan of Afghanistan football just because of the fight they used to show every time. Like Afghanistan just right now was in the same group as India in the Football World Cup qualifiers. And आप population देख लो, facilities देख लो, सारी चीजें देख लो. There is ज़मीन आसमान का difference in both countries, and still Afghanistan could hold India to a draw. That was the kind of spirit they had.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very fair point. And even though Afghanistan cricket के chief is saying कि Taliban is supporting and हमारा जैसा चल रहा था वैसे ही चलेगा, he has to put up a brave front, of course, and he has to keep things going. But Kevin Peterson, the former England superstar cricketer, he recently said कि राशिद खान के साथ में उनका बातचीत जब होता है इंग्लैंड में during the 100, all he is worried about right now is trying to get his family out of Afghanistan. तो हम लोग यहाँ बात कर रहे हैं कि for cricket to resume and for these stars to go around and doing the heroics that they have been doing, but वहाँ पे राशिद खान and I'm guessing all the other cricketers are also worried कि family situation, actual on ground situation काफी अलग है from the sporting exploits. At this point, I would like to bring in producer Shashank. Shashank, what do you make of this entire situation, Yar, and hearing all these previously feel-good stories of sports in Afghanistan and how it's looking so bleak currently? How does that make you feel?
While I was listening to you guys, it makes you think of so many things, and I'm just, speechless. We've been hearing just really terrible, tragic stories of what's been happening in Kabul and other places, and this kind of oppressive regime taking control of people's lives and just completely destroying it as they know it. All the progress that I'm sure all these teams have made. Like, Mihir, you were talking about that. The person who was going to be the first female para-Olympics athlete. She must have been dreaming about this for so long, and it's just completely gone. And I'm sure for so many other athletes who had been thinking about a career, had been building their lives. And sports, we know for athletes, like the kind of meaning it has. And not just for athletes, but for an entire culture. And just to think that that would go away because of this. Even like I was looking up specifically about that Paralympics. Some 10 years back, Afghanistan's Paralympics committee president, he was apparently killed by the Taliban. 11 bullets were fired on him. And when you hear like people being killed for playing sports and just not being allowed to do something because of certain clothes, it's just, I'm just left speechless.
Yeah, it certainly puts things in perspective. Before we wrap up the show, listeners, recommendation, Out of the Ashes, the documentary, and former host of the Express Sports podcast, Daksh Panwar, has recommended this documentary in one of the earlier episodes, but it needs to be repeated that it does a bang-on job of featuring the rise of Afghan cricket, and it follows the squad over 2 years as they go from playing on rubble pitches to battling their way around the globe and up the international cricket tables. They have footage from refugee camps in Pakistan where cricketers practice their skills. It's a very good documentary, Out of the Ashes. I think it's available on YouTube also, so do check it out. And on that note, let's wrap up for today. Stay tuned to the Express Sports podcast, and more importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.